Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
All right. So my name is Dr. Obadele Kambon, and I am a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies. I also did my PhD here at the University of Ghana, focusing on the Akan language. Now, when most people say the Akan language, they choose one dialect and they say that they're doing all of Akan. For my PhD, I use the three literary dialects of Akan. The first one is Asante Chi. Let's say it together. Asante Chi.
Asante Chi.
Asante Chi.
Asante Chi.
Which is the most widely spoken of the dialects of Akan. Chi.
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 Now, most of you, when you see it written, you'll say Twi. And if you do that, you may get beaten. No, I'm joking. So it's Chi. When you see the secondary articulation is the W, it just means round your lips as you pronounce the sound that comes in front, right? So you have the T. Let's do that sound. T. Now try that rounding your lips. Chi. Chi. Very good. You have others like Kwa. Kwa. So you just make that K sound, then you round your lips. Very good. So anytime you see that secondary articulation as a W, it just lets you know round your lips as you're pronouncing that sound. That's Asante Chi, which is the most widely spoken of the Akan dialects. Then you have Ekwapim Chi, and
You can pull it up a little bit.
Did you purposely omit your undergrad experience?
No, I didn't. My undergrad experience wasn't so much Chi, but let me go back to the back, just so you can know a little bit about me before we go into Chi. So I started studying the Chi language in 1998, right? And my mother brought me here to Ghana at that time for 2 weeks. And at that time, I didn't know any Chi whatsoever. She herself, she first came to Ghana in 1972, which is before I was born. And she came with Nana Dini Zulu. I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but he is the person who's responsible or oftentimes credited for resurrecting the Akan spiritual system in the Western Hemisphere, right? Now you have people who were still practicing Akan traditions in places like Suriname, Jamaica, but again, he was known as somebody who basically intentionally went back to Ghana or came back to Ghana in order to bring the spiritual systems to the people in the U.S., so less of a retention and more of an intentional reclamation. This is a process that we call re-Africanization. So my mother went on that trip. They had a chartered flight for $400. I'm sure your flight was more than $400, but at that point in time, she just saw the ad. It was a full-page ad in a newspaper in New York. She said, I'm going. She didn't even know where it was going. She said, it's going to Africa. I'm part of it. So, you know, we grew up in a very African-centered household. So, again, she brought me here for what's called the Sankofa journey. Let's say that together. Sankofa.
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 Now, many of you may say Sankofa. However, we're going to work on our pronunciation for everything today. Sankofa.
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 And because I don't think we have even a marker here, we're going to make this our whiteboard as well.
Yeah, so
We
your
have
right hand on the desk.
On the
On the
desk.
on the desk. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the marker, yeah.
And
I was hoping you would write your name so I can get it correct.
okay, let me do all of that here. This may be the best way, so I don't have to be again.
Morning.
Good morning.
Where you?
That's your hand.
This is my name. Welcome. So my name is Dr. Obadele Bakari Kambon. Right? Obadele all three high tones. Alright. And
Obadele.
Abadele.
I should sing it?
You have to sing it.
Obadele.
Exactly. As soon as you start thinking about African languages as you're singing them, that's when you start to pronounce them correctly. Right? Because the languages are very much tonal, which we'll go into today. So when we say it's a tonal language, that means the drums that you hear are not playing music, they're speaking. Because using the tone alone, you can understand what the words are that are being spoken. Now that may sound like, wow, that's so weird, that's so out there, but I bet you can do something like that already. So if I hum this tune, exactly. From the tones alone, you already know what the words are. Now picture that you can do that not only for a song, but for the entire language, from the tones alone. That means if you change the tones, then people may not know what you're talking about. Now let me hum another song for you. Who knows that song? I changed the tone and you don't know. That was happy birthday to you. So you weren't joking when you said you didn't know what that song was, right? Because by changing the tones, it makes it completely unintelligible. That's how the entire language works. So you have to be able to pronounce them specifically with those tones. When you do it with the tones, everyone will know. If you mess up the tones or switch up the tones and make it whatever, then people really won't know what it is that you're talking about, right? Unless maybe they've been around people who are not doing that. So my own name, you have a mid-tone and 3 high tones. Obadele. So the first one is an O. When you see the dots underneath, it makes it an O sound. It's similar to what this sound is in Afrikan. So these are 2 different writing systems. So Obadele. Bakari. Kambo. Very good.
What does it mean?
So Obadele translates to the king arrives at the house. Right? Coming from Oba, king, De, arrives, Ile, at the house. Right?
Looks like Yoruba.
Yoruba, it's Yoruba. Very good. So Obadele and Bakari, this is actually an ancient name coming from Kemet, even though it's used contemporarily throughout West Africa, East Africa as well. So Ba translates to, usually they translate this as world soul. Ka is that element of vitality, and then Re stands for the sun. So all of this is to say the world soul of the vitality of the sun. And then Kambon. My parents actually, when they got married, they didn't exchange wedding rings, they exchanged names. So they looked at each other's character and then they gave each other a name that they thought best encapsulated what the other one's character was about. And then also they selected a family name, so they actually chose this from a name book. And in the name book, it translated this as in the spirit of the people. Now when I came to Ghana, I found out, and it was given as a Nigerian name. When I came to Ghana, I found out that this is also a name that's given in the north of Ghana among the Dabangba speakers who speak the Dabangle language. So Kambon, when you say Kambon, it has a connotation of someone who is a warrior. So you have Kambona, who is like the head of the warriors, the leader of the warriors. So sometimes you have names that can cut across in different places, and we're going to go a little bit into that. So as I was mentioning, my mother brought me here to Ghana in '98 for part of the Sankofa journey. Let's say it together. Sankofa. Sankofa. And again, most people, if you see it written, you would say Sankofa. Right? But this is Sankofa. So not ko, but ko. When you see this open o, is that you know it's an o sound. And then fa. So not a f sound, it's a fa sound. Oftentimes you find black people in the States have a lot of what they call a schwa sound, that's a sound. And you find that very common in Wolof languages, right? Wolof language spoken in Senegal and Gambia. So what you find is that the way black people in the US specifically speak is a combination of various languages. In terms of the pronunciation, it's more tending towards Wolof, pronunciation of sounds. if you look at the pronunciation across the entire sentence, it's more like Bantu languages, where you put the emphasis on the syllable right before the last, right? And then you have other elements. So I've actually done a paper on that, but I won't belabor that. So I came on the Sankofa journey in 1998, and then she brought me again on the Sankofa journey in 1999. And by that time, there was quite a transition in my life where I started to really get into learning the language, right? And I had a goal for myself, and that was to learn the language well enough to teach native speakers the language. And that's actually what I'm doing here. I actually did an interview on African inventions yesterday on Kantanka TV entirely in Chi. So again, depending on what your goals are, that will determine to a large degree what you will be able to accomplish. So that was 99. By 2000, I came to do a year of study abroad. Now at that time, I was in undergrad at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Don't judge me, it wasn't as crazy at that point in time. But I decided to do my third year, my junior year, for study abroad here. So I did the entire year here. And because I already had a background, I was part of the CIEE program, which is a exchange program, study abroad program. So when I came here, they decided, okay, you already are conversational language. So I was doing one-on-one classes with Professor Kofi Achikum, who's still here on campus. If you haven't met him, you may, but he tends to teach Chi and do things of that nature. So we did one-on-one. By the second semester, I was taking classes with native speakers who've been speaking and writing it their whole life. And we were doing literature of the Akan language. We were doing poetry in the Akan language and the various dialects of Akan, so Ekwapim mainly and Asante. Poetry, drama, plays, everything, proverbs, all of that in the Akan language, which we'll learn more about today. When I went back to the U.S., I was taking Medu Necha. Does everyone know Medu Necha? That's what they call hieroglyphics, right? And my Medu Necha teacher is now the president of ASCAC, that's the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. And anytime he said a word, I would say, oh, that's just like this in Chi. He would say a word in ancient Kemetic language, or this is how you write. I said, oh, that's just like the Chi one. And he said, you know what? You have to go to grad school for connecting the ancient African languages to the contemporary African languages. Now at that time I said, no, I don't think he said, you're going. I said, okay. So that has charted my life's path. So I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison for African languages and literature, where I got a master's in African languages and literature and another master's in linguistics. Then I came here and I did my PhD in linguistics, and that's where I was coming to before, where I looked at Fanti, Ekwapim, and Asante. So write those down, Fanti. And I'm actually going to spell it the fancy way. Ekwapim, Asante. Now all of these have anglicized ways of writing them, so I've written all of them in the way they're written in the language themselves. This is also written in an anglicized way like this, right? Sometimes you'll even see it like that, but neither of those are the correct way. The correct way in the language itself is what you see on the left. Ekwapim, you'll see this anglicized like that, right? Now when I say anglicized, what do I mean? Englishified, Britishized, right? Something like that. So less Americanized. Again, the colonial history makes things like this. And then also you'll see this one, anglicized like that. There may be a singer with this name, the anglicized way, right? But it's actually Asante. And there was a white explorer called Bowditch who had a Gan guide the Gan people tend not to have this sound, the S sound, so they replace the S sound with a Sh sound. So anytime he was saying Asante, he would pronounce it like Ashanti, right? This is how English comes through Ashanti. Very good. So let's say this: Fanti, Ekwapim, Asante. So these are the three major dialects of Akan. The most widely spoken is Asante, right? And I'll give you a quick anecdote that it is spoken by 58% of Ghanaians as a first language, right? And by a great number of others as a second language. And it can take you very far, even when you travel to other countries. So I went to Burkina Faso, and the people asked me, okay, where are you coming from? All right, I'm coming from Ghana. They took me to the Ghanaian community, and what language do you think they were speaking? Asante Chi. And let me add in Chi since we're talking about the language.
So the dialect is Asante, but not, or is it Asante Tree?
So Asante can refer to either people or language because usually they're linked. If you say these are the Asante people, then they speak the Asante dialect of Akan. Now the umbrella term is called Akan. So all three of these fall under the umbrella of what is called Akan. So picture an umbrella. You don't want to get wet. We need to all come under the umbrella. We're all one thing, right? So the umbrella is Akan, but underneath that you have Asante, Fanti, and Ekwapim, and that is the prominent, how widely it's spoken, how popularly they are spoken in that order. So Asante Tree is most widely spoken. Then you have Fanti, which is second most widely. Did you draw an umbrella? That's nice.
Yeah, I did too.
Right.
Yeah, except my.
Visual. And then you have Fanti. Fanti. Let's say that. Fanti. Fanti.
Is it with the S?
Yes. That's how it's written in Fanti itself.
Fancy.
Fanti. Very good. So in Fanti they have that S sound, and then they have the Z sound, right? Z. So whereas Asante Chi would say Didi, that in Fanti they would say Zizi. So they put a little Z in there. And then Ekwapim is the third most widely spoken, and it's the one that's spoken very close to us in the Ekwapim mountains, right? So if you go to Ebri, this is where you'll find Ekwapim Chi spoken. And it's the smallest. However, it was the first one to be reduced to writing by the Basel Mission Society. So when they came, they said, we need to translate the Bible, we need to do all these things. And they found this part of Ghana where we are now to be quite hot, right? Lots of mosquitoes, things like this, so the whites couldn't deal with where we are now. So they decided to go up into the hills because it was cooler there, and because of the elevation, there were less mosquitoes. So this is where they, set up camp. And because that happened to be where they set up camp, that was the first one to be reduced to the Latin script of writing. Right? Reduced, yes. Now, we had other means of encoding information, such as Adinkra. Has everyone heard of Adinkra?
Yes.
So what I'm wearing today, you can find Adinkra on it. This one is called Jininimang. Let's say that together. Jininimang.
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 So this translates to ram's horns, what you see here. And this is also what you'll find on the University of Ghana logo, right? So Jininimang, it translates to ram's horns. And when I say encoding information,
That's the light, yes,
my
that's
first
the
one.
That's it. Thank you.
It didn't look
So
like a
that
light,
gives
right?
it
So Jininimang. So when I say encoding information, it means the same way that I could write this here and then leave, and then someone else can come in and say, okay, that's Nana, right? I've encoded the information so that someone else can decode it and understand what the message is here, right? That's the same thing that you can do here, but instead of just a single sound, na, na, that I can do that for an entire word or an entire proverb, right? So in this case, the proverb is, which translates to, if a ram is going to cheat or bully someone, it uses its heart and not its horns. What message do we get from that? And I'll type that out for you.
Maybe because it's obvious that a ram might use its horns to, when it's in conflict, it would do the latter instead and do what's unexpected, do the unexpected.
Very good. Do the unexpected. Any other thoughts or ideas?
You can cause more damage by this internal using the heart than using physical force.
Very good. Very good. All right. Any other thoughts? Nothing is incorrect. You won't be beaten or dragged down. So what do you think about when you're talking about using the heart?
Connecting the.
Let's think about it like this. So the man here represents physical force, whereas the heart represents will, your will to do something. So you may have somebody who's big and muscular and whatever, but then you just tap them, oh, right? So that person looks like they have the horns, but they're missing this. But then you can have somebody who's small, right? A woman, you'd be like, oh, she can't do anything. But if she has this, right? They say it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, right? That's the same idea that you have in this one, Genie Man. Very good. And this is what you find on, again, the University of Ghana seal. And then also you have these ones, Aya. Aya. And the proverb that goes along with that is, means rule, means rule, means rule, means rule, which is I am not scared of you. And Aya is a fern, the plant called a fern. So how does the plant called a fern relate to this proverb associated with it, means rule?
It's associated with what proverb?
This proverb means rule, I'm not scared of you. To get a relation, it means that you have to observe nature, you have to know something about ferns, fern behavior, for lack of a better word.
Well, they're hardy plants.
Exactly,
They can
they're hardy.
grow anywhere.
Somebody has been out in nature observing ferns, right? They're very hardy plants, so you can see a fern that will grow anywhere. And the idea is I'm not scared of you, right? Even if you try to chop it off,
Right.
it will grow right back. It says, use it all. So why do you think the University of Ghana, and again, all of this is to today, today I'm going to speak to you about the significance of the Akan language, and this is an example that the University of Ghana, which is a flagship school here in Ghana, would use Akan Adinkra symbols on its seal. And this is one example of the topic that we're actually going to get into, right? So why do you think the University of Ghana would select this, the ram's horns, Trinity Man, what you see? Let me write out the name in front of the proverb. Trinity Man. And then so this is the name of it, and then this is the proverb that goes along with it. Why do you think the University of Ghana would select this and this to be on its logo?
I think because they understand and the administration understands that knowledge is power. Not only knowledge, but knowledge of self is power.
Very good. Knowledge of self is power. How does that relate directly to either of these two proverbs, that idea?
Because the first proverb, it talks about the ram's horns. So, of course, the physical exterior, people would assume that most people would use the physical exterior, but the University of Ghana understands that the will to learn and the will to exceed in life is more important.
Very good. I like that. You know what?
Well, just like I'm sure the University of Wisconsin and the University of Ghana, in terms of physical facilities, are different. But it doesn't, and I'm sure you know, it doesn't translate into the types of people that they're producing. And I'm sure you know that from Morehouse also, that the facilities aren't going to make the person, you say I can grow anywhere. Right, and you should be able to grow regardless. These aren't fancy chairs, but we can learn a lot
Very good.
sitting here.
Very good. I really think this point gets to the heart of why these two were selected and then put in combination. Because here you have a university established in the late 50s, and you have other universities that were established in the 1700s and 1800s. And now this young university has to compete against those other universities. But the idea is we're not afraid, we're not scared. And then even though we may not have the facilities, and some universities like Harvard have an endowment bigger than the entire GDP of Ghana, right, to the tune of billions, right? So now this university has to compete against that university. But imagine if you took the point of view of, oh, look, your horns are so big, I can't fight you. Then where would Ghana be if we just sat down, right? You can't win the game if you're sitting in the bleachers, right? You have to be in it to win it. So this is, part of the idea. So what we have is an example of the Akan language being used not only in a ethnic sense, but in a university sense and a national sense, right? So you'll find as you go throughout society that you'll see Adinkra everywhere, right? On individual houses, used in logos, used like we see here on cloth, right? And once you have the eyes to see, then you can actually read this. The same way you can read this, you can also read that, but you have to be literate in order to do so, right? The same way you need to learn, oh, this is what this sound is, that's the same way you have to learn this. So it's all about encoding and decoding, encoding and decoding. Now I wanted to go a little bit into the history of the Akan language, and I wanted to share a little bit in terms of comparisons, some of the work that I've done and other scholars have done. That one thing that you'll find is there's a scholar named Obenga, Theophile Obenga, and this is part of what set me off on the journey to linguistics. When I came here, I did my PhD in linguistics, and I was fortunate to win the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD thesis in the humanities in the year that I came out. So it's the first time that an African of the diaspora was able to get that award for the best PhD at the University of Ghana. And again, it was on Asante, Ekwakim, and Fanti. And it was on something called serial verb nominalization. Can we say that? Serial?
Serial.
Verb.
Verb.
Nominalization.
Nominalization.
Some of you are looking at me like I just spoke P. Now, what that is you have verbs that are connected, even though they may not be side by side, that they're connected. So for example, I could say something like fa bra, which is take, come, but you can put something in between the fa and the bra. So I could say fa nyamano nyina bra. So the fa came here, nyamano nyina, and then the bra came there. Now these are still connected because when you say fa, that's to take, and then bra is to come. What I said is take all the things and come, right? So these are serial verbs. It means that they come in a successor connecting word. You don't need and. So in English, you may say take this and come. In P, you don't need any connecting word. You can just have this and that side by side, and there's no problem. Cobra, go come.
That's what we just said, Cobra.
Right? Sankofa, return, go, take. Sankofa. Right? So all of these are examples of serial verbs. Now, what I did in my thesis was look at how these types of serial verbs are made into nouns in all three of those different dialects. And then I did an analysis of how those are similar across the dialects and how those differ across the dialects. Right? So this is what some of the work that we do as linguists in order to see how the language works. But again, to go a little bit back into the history, the very first writing system in the history of the world was in Africa. Is everyone aware of that? All right. What was the name of that writing system? Very good, Medu-Neter. And matter of fact, if I can show you that Medu-Neter, and then we'll come back to the slide. That Medu-Neter is actually the source of the writing systems that we use to this day. So the origin of written language, and these are actually the very first examples of written language anywhere in the world. So bone and ivory tags, pottery vessels, and clay seal impressions bearing hieroglyphics on North Abydos, 300 miles south of Cairo, have been dated to between 3400 and 3200 BCE, making them the oldest known examples of Egyptian writing. These dates challenge the commonly held belief that early logographs pictographic symbols representing a specific place, object, or quantity first evolved into more complex phonetic symbols in Mesopotamia. So what you see here are the bone and ivory tags that were used for categorizing. So it came about from a very natural and practical process of I need to say what's in this jar and where it came from. So I'm going to mark those by encoding information, right? And the identifier is an extension of that as well. Now, it may also interest you that Medu Neter, what they call hieroglyphics. So Medu Neter is the indigenous term, and it translates to divine or sacred words. Medu Neter. Medu is words, and then Neter is divine or sacred. So just like in Chi, the adjective comes after the noun. So in English, you would say a red dog. In Chi, you would say Okraman Koko. Okraman means the dog, and then the adjective comes after. So that's how the language is structured, and many African languages are structured in that way, right? So what you see here, and we'll return to Chi, but I do want to show you this correspondence. So what we use is a Latin alphabet, right? The letter A, right? We can all recognize that. Now, when you were a child, did anyone tell you why the letter A has to look like that? Why is it shaped like that?
Nope.
If you ask, shut up, kid, just learn it. But if we were given a chance to learn our own history as African people, then we would see that this letter is derived from the Greek, which is ultimately derived from Medu Neter. This is a vulture, right? So the reason why your capital A looks the way it looks is because it's showing the feet and the tail and the body of the vulture. Very good. The second letter, Ba, this came into Greek like this, right? So you see that this is a bird that has a crest on its chest here. And then that derived into Greek here, and then ultimately into Latin in this way.
I teach this in my class,
Very good.
and we call it vulture, but the Egyptians call it the aleph.
Aleph.
So-
Aleph is actually an Arabic term.
Okay,
So the sound itself makes an
sound.
ah sound.
that's the sound, so that's why they would use that letter when they wanted you to say that sound.
Right.
Ah,
Right. So that is the name of the actual vulture. It's called ah, right? So it's similar to in Chi, you would have Kwa Kwa Debi. That's the name for a crow. So the name derives from the sound that it makes. Kwa Kwa Debi,
okay.
right?
Right.
So this is the same process that you have going on here. And, in terms of the theory of origins of language, that's one of the things that's been posited, that you would name things, or the origin of language may come from just calling the thing by the sound that it makes. Very good. So here we have the G, and then that ultimately derives into Greek this way, into Latin this way, and then it splits into two as K and G. Here you have the D, which is actually a symbol of the hand. Comes into Greek this way, and then it comes into Latin this way. So not to belabor the point, but when you're writing right now, all the things that you use are derived from what your African ancestors invented through the similar process of how we continue to invent writing systems to this day. The only people who have not invented writing systems are the ones who we usually ascribe writing to, including the English, including the French, including the Greeks, including the Romans with Latin, that none of them have invented writing systems. African people have invented Medu Neter, Meroitic, spoken in ancient Meroe, Nsibidi, written in Nigeria, Shomun in Cameroon, Vai, Mende, Inko. All of these are writing systems found all throughout the continent that we invented. Again, the only people who have not invented it are the ones who we think invented it. But let's come back here. All of that was to come into showing you correspondences so we can get a little view of the language. So this is actually the type of correspondences that I was making. So after I came here to do my year of study abroad, 2000, 2001, when I came back to Medu Neter class, I kept making these connections. So for example, you would have a word like this, bin, b, e, n, bin. Then anytime you see this bird, It lets you know it's something that's bad or small, right, or diminutive. So being, so I was learning that word. I said, oh, that's just like the Chi word, boni. Okay, so we found this in Akan, boni. But now look far off Wolof. Where is Wolof spoken?
Senegalese.
Very good.
The Gambia.
Right, Senegambia, Senegal and Gambia. And they have a very similar word, bon. So if I want to speak Wolof, I say nit ku bonga. I would say you're a bad person, nit ku bonga. Right? That's the same bon here. And then you start to realize there may be some type of connection here, right? You go to the Songhai language, Boni, and that's spoken in modern day Mali, right? So you have to understand at this point in time, hold on, I think that there's a connection that Akan didn't just pop up out of the ground here or fall from the sky here, that as African people we're all connected. Similar thing, the preposition for in Medu Neter is So this is an owl, it has the sound. In Akan, the way to say inside this preposition is to say mu. Mu. If I say dam mu, I'm saying in the building or in the room. Dam mu. Now in Kikongo, where do you think Kikongo is spoken? Very good. So Kikongo is spoken in Congo, the same word mu is used for inside that same preposition. I think there's a relationship here, right? That's our hypothesis. Baole is spoken in the Ivory Coast, mo, again for that same preposition. And Prof. Obenga in his book, he goes through over 104 of these words where he shows across the entire African continent how contemporary African languages are related to the ancient Medu Neter language. So again, when we're thinking about the Akan language, it didn't just pop up here, it's related to other African languages. We're all brothers and sisters. Another example, ba, g, ba, a. This is ba, a, ba, and then this actually shows you that what we're looking at is an arm. So in Akan that becomes aba. I say mebo abaso. And I'm patting you on your arm like I'm giving you props. Yoruba, akpa. In Chiluba becomes iboko. The bo is what we have in there. So you have an a, and an o. Here we have u, and o. But again, this is just to give you a very short snippet of these types of connections.
Are African people aware of the similarities across the different languages? Or this is something you also have to teach the native speakers?
Usually people are aware of similarities of language in their immediate environment, not like continent-wide. So people here would know that Asante Chi is similar to Fanti, is similar to Ekwapim and all of the Akan dialects. But in terms of the relationships between even Akan and Yoruba, that's not something that would be readily, known just by, people, unless they're doing linguistic research in order to show this. So this is something that as linguists we need to bring to the fore so people can understand, because it can be a unifying force to understand that we're all connected and we have the same root. Right? So let's continue. Any questions so far of anything we've covered?
I do have one.
Oh,
The comment you made to what is asked for
yeah.
is exactly what people are asking outside. Do you know that this program has the language that was written? And usually they go to, they come to Ghana and they go to a part where the language can be connected. And if you're interested, this is making it on a continent or in West Africa. Nice. And another area you consider, since I'm here, is NEH, National Endowment of Humanities, which goes into the culture and language. With respect to Ghana and American
Was that comment for him or for us?
No, for him, I was talking about NEH cannot
He was just trying to
National Endowment of Humanities, is culture of Africa and
Obadele.
Mini,
Can I ask you a question?
feel free.
So I saw in the note you said, it said that, I guess, was it saying that during the Berlin conference, they also partitioned language?
No, I was saying that the way modern day linguists do in terms of chopping up the language is similar to how at the Berlin conference they, exactly. So it's making an analogy, it's not saying the Berlin conference didn't deal with linguistics at all. But I'm saying what modern day European scholars do is that they'll separate Medu Neter from the rest of Africa and say, oh, these are completely unrelated, don't worry about anything, right? However, that process is similar to just chopping arbitrarily without consulting African people, just like what happened at the Berlin conference, right?
Do you think we could, also just one more, do you think we could have, that you could send us that PowerPoint you're showing?
No problem, no problem. That's a PowerPoint that we use for Intro to African Languages for all the second year students here at University of Ghana. Because Prof mentioned similarities between Akan and Yoruba, that's actually what I did my master's thesis on. And what linguists do in terms of the comparative method is show that it's not only this word looks like that word, it's to show that these are recurrent sound correspondences, meaning that they're systematic, that they're patterned. That anytime you see this sound in this language, you should see that sound in that language. And I'll give you a series that shows this. So on the left-hand side, you have Yoruba. On the right-hand side, you have Akan. So to be enough, you see to, let's say that, to. On Akan, so. So here, to, so. So now we're going to expect that anytime we see the T here, we should see the S here. Right? This is systematic and pattern. So here, te, that is to spread in the sense of like to spread a mat. And P, se, to spread a mat. Right? So now anytime I see the T, I should see the S here. Ton, to be finished. San, to be finished. Again, anytime I see the T, I should see what?
S.
Very good. Ton, to light. So, to light. Where we ito, urine, so, urine. To, to urinate. So, urinate. Eta, 3. Esa, 3. Now, this 3 you'll find in various Bantu languages as well, Kiswahili, Tatu, right? So you'll see the ta in there, ta, all throughout all these different languages. So again, showing these correspondences, showing how they're systematic, it lets you know how things changed in Akan, whereas they may have stayed the same in the Yoruba. But really it just shows this relationship between them. And this is just one example. In Yoruba, ti, that. So I can say N-E-T, the person that. And P, se, that. Te, in Yoruba, son, in P, and so forth and so on. Another example, eti, that's ear. Ason, that's ear. So again, you can see these systematic correspondences. Whenever we see the T here, we see the S in Akan. And one of the ones that's more compelling is the basic vocabulary. Usually you look for things that aren't normally borrowed. So languages would have their own word for 3, like basic numbers and things of that nature. And you can see this also in Bantu languages, one of the ones that I mentioned, Tatu, T, Tu, and so forth and so on.
Bantu and Swahili.
Right, so Swahili is a Bantu language. So when you're saying Bantu, this is, again, the umbrella term. And then Kiswahili is an example of one of those. Kikongo, isiZulu, isiXhosa, all of these are under the grouping of Bantu languages.
You said that definitively. Swahili is a Bantu language.
Yeah.
So the argument is over.
Which argument? Now there's a lot of
The
lexical-
debate, let me say.
There's a lot of
Influences of
Influences.
other European languages that are implemented in Swahili.
well, mainly Arabic.
Thank you.
Mainly Arabic in Kiswahili. Structurally and syntactically, that is to say, it's a Bantu language, right? It has noun classes like all other Bantu languages. It has prosody like all other Bantu languages. So all of these are linguistic features, but you have lots of vocabulary. Now, we can look at even Ebonics, what they call Ebonics in the US, that because structurally it's similar to other African languages, you can see that as the core root, and the less influence it has from US English, the closer it is to other African languages. So especially in Gullah, right, what they call the Geechee Gullah dialects of Georgia, South Carolina, Sapelo, all the Sea Islands there. So actually, let me pull this up for
So
you.
majority of them come from.
You have, let me actually show you something so we can see visually exactly what I'm talking about. So I did an article for Africanisms in Contemporary English. And what it does is it shows syntactically and in other ways these correspondences. So in Ebonics, you could say something like, where's she at? Where's she at? Right? Where she at? Now, before the work of noted linguist Lorenzo Dow Turner, white linguists were saying, oh, they speak like that because it's baby talk. They just can't understand a real language. What was actually the case was that we invented language. And this is how language is supposed to be structured. So if you're not speaking in this way, it means that you've deviated from the people who invented language itself, right? So you find in Yoruba, you could say, Nibolowa. Nibolowa, with the wa, the at, the locative is at the end. Where it is, she at. Right? Nibolowa. You could have also in Akan, Ehefanawa, where again the locative, the at, is coming at the end. And Wala Fanmonik. Again, the locative, the at, is coming at the end. Fan, where, mo, she, nek, at. Where, she, at. So basically, even though we're using English words, we are speaking syntactically African languages. This is the structure of African languages. You have something called a resumptive pronoun, right? This means you say the name and then you say the pronoun again. So you're like Tyrone, he always be getting in trouble. Tyrone, he always be getting in trouble. I could just say Tyrone always be getting in trouble. I could say he always be getting in trouble, and you can do that. I knew people from Texas when I was at Morehouse, they always added him at the end. Tyrone, he always be getting in trouble, him. And I thought that was so interesting. I was like, why you add the him? But you can do that in Wolof as well. You can add that additional thing. So in Fancy, you could say, Obenino, oye, juma papa. So Obenino, so man, he does work good. The man works very hard. So that's the structure, that you have not only the subject, but now you have the pronoun to resume that subject again. And we can find another example in Chi, Openino or Nomensa. So the elder, he or she, you can use this as a gender neutral pronoun, drinks wine. And Yoruba, in my own name, you have the same resumptive pronoun. Oba ode ile, Oba ode ile, and that's why you have a high tone on the a, because Oba would be mid-tone. But in the name, it's never Oba dele, never. It's Oba dele, and it has to be that because the high tone is coming from here, the O that's been deleted in the process of deletion. Oba dele.
It sounds like from what you're saying, when you make the connection between the African languages and what has been coined as Ebonics in America, that even though there's something innate in Black people that has kept us rooted in our culture regardless of the colonization, that, see, because it's been switched, flipped, and another standard that has been created outside of what our norm is, unless we follow that norm now, because that's become the universal standard for the most part in most continents, we can't even go back to that. What's your, I'm using can't, don't want to use can't, as a absolute.
Because you're an African, not an Afrikaans. Very good. So you know, to this point, there is a process known as re-Africanization and a connected process called de-whitenization, right? De-whitenization. A lot of people like the re-Africanization because that's cool. You just add more stuff. I add on this bracelet, whatever. The de-whitenization tends to be a bit more difficult, where you say, I am getting rid of all of these things that may not be implanted in me in my own best interest. The created taste, the created desires, the desire to look like this, the desire to talk like that, or things of that nature. So I wouldn't say can't either, because there are decisions that we need to make. Are we going to operate in the best interest of someone else? Or are we going to operate independently in our own best interest, right? Someone gets enriched by us making one choice. Someone gets impoverished by us making a different choice, but it's up to us. I want to give more examples here. Bintu Nana Ataya. More. So Bintu drinks tea, her, right? That one is just like the Texas example. Man and Dakaru Ladik. So man, so me, and Dakaru is where I live. So I have the pronoun again coming there. So again, this is a similarity. You always have the resumptive with, and you find this in Akan as well. He came begging me for money with his rotten teeth. So you can do this in so-called Ebonics. I prefer to call it anti-American African. I can explain why as well.
Anti-American African.
Right. And the idea, so some people call themselves African Americans. The language has been able to be persistent because it has, the people who speak the language have decided that we're not going to go under the shadow of Americanism, right? We're going to retain our Africanness. And when I say African, I mean African not in the sense of one single ethnic group, but across the entire continent, as we can see from these examples, right? So the anti-American is the resistance, and then the African is the whole. Very good. So in Ebonics, we can say, you better go ahead with your fine self, or with your sexy self. So that's that same resumptive with this, right? So it seems superfluous, but it's a structure that has been retained from African languages. You can also use it positively. Everyone likes her with her beautiful face, right? Usually in anti-American African, it tends to be in another way. See there? That's why you trip with your stuck-up self. And you know, there's something cosmic in that. It's like divine retribution. If you act this way, then this is gonna happen with your stuck-up self. While Pradin and Aswadin, that she got hurt with his or her hard-headed self. Also, we have multiple negation. We don't know why we do this. Oh, that's just incorrect. You're not doing it right. Can nobody tell me nothing about no spades? Right? Can't nobody tell me nothing about no spades. It's supposed to be like double negative, triple negative. Like this is supposed to be. But in another example, don't nobody go nowhere. Now, if someone says don't nobody go nowhere, does that mean you're supposed to go? If you do, you're going to get a spanking and learn your language that way. Ain't nobody said nothing new. Now, in Akan, you can do AC, Ama, Kweku, Fufu, Andi, and Dakra. All of these are negations. So AC, that's the name. Ama did not give or allow. Kweku, Fufu, the food, Fufu. Andi, to not eat. Anda, and to not lay down and sleep. Kra, at all. All of these are negations on negations on negations. But it doesn't now start making it positive. It's only more negations. So AC did not give Kweku Fufu to eat and sleep at all. But we negate every one of those verbs. And Wala Hamudara. So Hamul, to not know, he or she not know. Dara, nothing. That doesn't make it that you know something. You don't know nothing. That doesn't mean that you know something. Right? Genitive marking, an agreement. So you say something like, that girl had big than a mug. In North Carolina, we do than a mug. Sometimes I say than a mug, people don't know what I'm talking about. But you can do that. And then similarly, and I kind of say abanotiso pa. So again, this emphatic serves a similar function to this one here. Kofinin and pabwati. Kofinin and pabwati. Orire tobi pupo. His or her head is very big. So you can find, again, similar structures. Here as well, you have to have agreement between the different elements in there. There we go. So here you come with that old BS again, polite company. Odin Jimmy Simon, he or she has brought his or her foolishness again. Or he or she buys food at the market. Now, what this is going into is that you don't need a copula where is there. I could say something like olewa, right? I could say he or she has beauty without having a copula. She is beautiful. I could just say, you ugly, she's smart, you good, right? All of those types of things. Also habitual, right? You can have iterativity in the habitual. So I can say, she be tripping, he be wild. In Yoruba, you can use man to do the same thing. So man lets you know that it's something that habitually happens all the time, right? So I could say, oman jon laro, that he or she habitually eats in the morning. It's not just one time. It does the same thing as be eating, be doing, whatever it is. Moman kawe nile, moman kawe nile. So that is, I read at home, but not just once. I'll be doing that, right? You also have something like fenta, right? I don't know if any of y'all can do fenta, but you can say, I'm finna go, we finna eat. Right? Some people do it different ways. So some people say full fixing to, or fixing to go. Where I was raised, we use more finna. Some people do fenta. And this is where you go to a HBCU. That's where you start to learn other dialects of black, anti-American, African, because like there are certain things that's like, no, we don't say it that way. But then you say, oh, I guess that's acceptable there. So then you just start, and so now you can talk Texan and talk Louisiana and other stuff. So in Akan, you can say, oh, bekanasim, that he's about to. It does the same thing. He fit to do this. So this even brings in questions of translation, that why would we translate to the Queen's English when it may be closer for us to learn Ebonics using Chi or learn Chi using Ebonics? Because they're right beside us. Like here, we're side by side, but instead of just going from one to another, we're going to go all the way up to the Queen's English and then come right back to where we were. This is the point I was making before. He ugly than a mug. We don't need any copula there. And Wolof, or he's smart, and Wolof we can say Dafanyo, he or she, he, black, and is in there. If you put it is there, it's wrong. It's ungrammatical, it's incorrect. You're speaking incorrect Wolof there. In Yoruba, I could say O Tobi, he or she, big, that's it. You won't say anything like O Je Tobi. If you do that, you're wrong. You don't say O Ni Tobi, you're wrong. What are you even speaking? Right?
Are most other languages similar to this? Because I've been told that it's harder to learn English than other languages for people who know more than one language. Is that the reason why? Because they have added on so many different things to the language, or changed it so much from the original.
Right. English is a combination. It's a pan-Eurasian language. It's a pan-Eurasian language, right? Naturally occurring because you have what are called conlangs, like constructed languages where people intentionally say, like Esperanto, right? They intentionally say we're going to create a language out of all these Latin Romance languages so that they can understand each other with a base. English works like that, but it occurred naturally because of English speakers being conquered by the Romans. That's one. And then the Norman invasion, they were conquered and under the French. This is why you have things in English that you don't have in other languages, like a difference between the name for the animal and the name for the meat of the animal. Because those who were herding the animals, they spoke the lower register of the language, right? You're just a herder, right? So something like cow and pig. But once it comes to the high table, then it becomes beef. Then it becomes pork, right? So all of those are French ones. The ones on the high table are French. The ones that you speak in the barn, those are English. And this is what's interesting here in Ghana. People look at English like a language of learning. You have to do science, you have to do math in English. But at that point in time, English was seen as the language, the lowest language. You could never do anything scientific in English? What? It would be ridiculous, because French was a language of learning. Before that, Latin was a language of learning, right? So it just lets us know that when we don't understand history, because that's how people look at African languages now, the people who invented mathematics, we now look at it as you can't do mathematics in an African language. Whereas if I do mathematics, to even say any number in Yoruba, it requires multiple mathematical operations. If I say méjìdínlógójì, say that with me, méjìdínlógójì. So ogoji is to say ogun meji. I'm saying 2 times 20. To even say the word 40, there's no other word to say it.
What's wrong here?
Right.
We have to get that language, because you need to put it in your class. Get it right. Say it one more time.
Méjìdínlógójì. So the way to say 40 is to say 2 times 20 as a legitesimal system, meaning a base 20 system, right? Then to say 38, méjìdínlógójì, 2 subtracted from 2 times 20. That's the way to say 38. That's not a shortcut, that's not a long cut, that's it.
So would that make teaching math easier because you're using the expressions as opposed to creating other ways? It sounds like it would.
Well, even when you when you start to learn other languages, it makes you understand the language that you speak already better. So if you think about English as a base 10 system, African people also invented base 10, Meduneche as a base 10 numerical system. That when you're saying 20, the twin means 2 and then the T means 10. So all you're saying is 2 tens, 30, 40, 50, 60. If you ever thought about why do they all end with T, it's because it just means 10.
I think it would make it easier for kids to learn multiplication tables.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the language is telling you
Right.
what's going on,
Right.
opposed to you trying to figure out,
Right.
taking these individual words, trying to figure it out.
Now, interestingly, among Yoruba, native Yoruba people, like my Yoruba instructor, he would take me around to the market and I'm doing all my things in Yoruba, and the people there are used to using English, right? So he would say, Ojuti or Biokutio. He said, are you ashamed or are you not ashamed? Because here's this guy, he just started learning a year ago and he's doing these mathematical operations. So even to say odd numbers is an even more complex operation. So if I say, Adota, let's say that, Adota, 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 Adota. So Adota is coming from, first you have to do the multiple of 20 before I come back down to 50. So the multiple of 20 is Ogun, Meta, Ogota. Ogota, right, it's saying 3 times 20. So now once I have made that first calculation, now I do add, which is 10 subtracted from that operation I have already done. So 10 subtracted from 60, or literally 10 subtracted from 20 times 3. That's the only way that I can say 50 in the language. Right? And then we go into.
So mentally you have to figure it out, yeah.
So it's base 20, and then once it goes into the 200s, then it becomes base 200. Then once it goes into 2000, then it becomes base 2000. So if I say Egbaji, that's the way to say 4,000, which is Igba Mewa, which is 200 times 10, that's the way to say 2,000. And then G, 2 of them. 2, exactly, 200s times 10, right? So these are, our languages.
In this particular one, I know it's Yoruba.
Yoruba, this is Yoruba.
The only way you can say it in Ghana, and Akan.
Yeah, so in Akan, it's a base 10 system and it works similar to how the English one works. So if I say Edu, let's say that with me, Edu, that's 10. Now to say 2 of them, Adu Onu. The nu is 2, so Adu Onu. the sa, we mentioned before that sa is 3 in Chi, is ta in Yoruba, and ta or meta, right? So the sa, if I say adu, asam, adiasam. So 10, now 3 of them. Because remember the adjective, it modifies the noun, even if that noun is another number. So edu is the 10. Now how many of them do I have? Edu asa, adu anine, adu onum, adu osia, adu osong, adu awachi, adu okron, and then oha. So now we're in a different system from the hundreds. So now if we do multiples of 100, I have hundreds, 2 of them. I have sam, I have 9, I have num, I have sian, and then when we get to 1,000, that's our pin, impe nu, impe sam, impe 9, impe num, all the way up to impe du, 10 of them, right?
Thank you. Rodney, the reason why I said this is what I want. When you are sending U.S. application,
You are the links.
I want you don't need to say it to 1 million, but I want you to say it in such a way that your students in the classroom know exactly that we can do maths. And if you don't know it, grab him, hold him responsible to make you understand. Basically, you don't need to be perfect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because the problem that the Department of Education has, before they eventually put, the last period of time, we don't put maths, we don't put sciences, we don't put technology in this program. But some intellectuals begin to argue that you really can make mathematics very attractive by storytelling. You can make mathematics very, because some people don't like math. When the word math comes in, they become nervous.
We're talking about most.
This the
It's
one
just an
they're
urban
trying to
class.
find a way to make it attractive. This is the one way to do that. If you can, first of all, learn how to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 10, and then be able to say that in the classroom with alacrity, and your student will grab it. And if that's what they grab from this program, you perfectly done your work.
Are you a mathematician or?
This is mathematics and
Yes, actually, we both teach now.
Okay, beautiful.
who also teach maths? Okay, then I am, you talk here, I'm going to
A math teacher.
math teachers. And the question is, how do they bring maths? How do they bring African studies in mathematics?
Now,
So that is possible.
now both of you are aware that African people invented math, right? Right, Lebombo Bon, Ishango Bon, 40,000 years ago, and it's women who invented math in order to calculate.
Say that part again.
It's women who invented math in order to calculate their menstrual cycle,
Thank you.
right?
I want that to be videoed.
I think we caught it.
Recorded.
Actually have a slide that shows it if I can pull it up, and we're doing a bit of a sidebar, but I like sidebars. So.
Sidebar.
You
Yeah.
gotta say the whole thing again.
Yes.
Where did math come from and who invented it? I'm sorry, I missed the
You
whole
missed
thing.
that whole thing.
Oh my
no problem.
goodness.
Math came from Africa. The oldest mathematical instruments were found in Africa. The Limbombo bone, which is dated to over 40,000 years ago. And it's the fibula of a baboon. And I'll see if I can actually pull up a slide to show you that. And the second oldest mathematical instrument is called the Ishango bone. And that is also made out of the fibula of a baboon. So you may wonder, well, why the baboon? Well, if you go to ancient Kemet, you'll see that the divinity of math and science was oftentimes represented by a baboon. Now, the connection is that baboons are known for howling at the moon. So what they're doing is they're telling you that we're intentionally making a category so that we know that we're doing this intentionally, that we're only going to use the fibula of an animal associated with the moon to let you know it's because of the moon and calculations of the moon that we are doing the mathematics. So etched into the fibula of a baboon are prime numbers, multiplication, all these different things that are advanced mathematical concepts 40,000 years ago. and also reckoning the time of how long it would take for a menstrual cycle to come again. So what you have is an organic African way of categorizing things. Baboon. If I ask you, what's the connection between a baboon, a moon, a menstrual cycle, you'd be like, what? and mathematics, you'd be like, what? There's no connection. But what African people are doing is that, no, there is a connection. The baboons are linked to the moon. The moon is linked to a menstrual cycle, and to know when we can give life, we need mathematics in order to do that. When are we not able to give life, we need mathematics in order to calculate that. If you can't calculate it, then you don't know when, oh, I'm pregnant, I can't move with the rest of the group. Oh, I'm giving birth, so now when the winds come and the rains come or whatever, then I'm gonna have a problem. But when you can calculate it, then you know that, all right, when we are giving birth at this time, that's the perfect time for us to be able to move with the rest of the group, right? Please go ahead.
In reading Professor Ananobi's book, he talked about when Africa was decolonized and how leaders were placed in particular positions and they were not educated, and it was all intentional, and they weren't able to continue on and develop the country. Just a very simple thing. So even looking at education in America, studies have shown that leadership is important. But the leaders haven't been trained to do it. The teachers are given the instruments. We go through these training programs, but they really aren't. The materials even reference back to our forefathers, and they mention learning from our captors, those that have colonized us, those who have brainwashed us. We're not really learning, and we're perpetuating whatever they want us to pass down to our people, because they don't have our best interests at heart at the end of the day.
Right.
So it's just like,
You have a question or
no,
is it
I
statement?
think I'm making a
Is it
statement.
venting?
I just, yeah, I'm feeling some kind of way.
Yeah.
What's good, let's go.
Yeah. I think we were all waiting for the question. Because you said, I have a question.
Yeah, I'm going.
So, this is exactly what is being done, that according to Nana Amawale, also known as Malcolm X, he says only a fool would expect his enemies to educate his children, right? So we have to ask ourselves, why would we expect the people who enslaved, raped, colonized, lobotomized, genocided us to teach us, right? And then we come to see, well, how come they didn't teach us that the very first mathematical instrument in the history of the world was in Africa? The Limbombo bone, 44 dated to 44,200 years ago. Ishango bone, the second oldest mathematical instrument in the history of the world, dated to 20,000 years ago. And here you see the actual mathematical operations that are etched on here. So here you have prime numbers between 10 and 20, 19, 17, 13, 11. You don't do that happenstance 40,000 years ago. You have to understand these are not divisible by 2. Or any other number other than themselves. Then you have other mathematical
Did you say
operations.
they are not?
They are not divisible.
So this
by
kind
other
of like
numbers.
anti what we teach.
No, they're complementary, because you have some numbers that are divisible, some that aren't divisible. You require all of
okay.
the numbers. You require all of them to make a whole. If you only have these and you don't have those, and you don't have a whole. So all of these, this is the other side going to complementary, that these prime numbers between 10 and 20 add up to 60 on this side. Here, these prime numbers, you have 9, you have 19, then you have 21, which is not a prime number, and then you have 11, also add up to 60. So on one side, you're adding up to 60, on the other side, you're adding up to 60. This is not happenstance. And then in between, you add up to 48, right? So you see the 7, you have 5 notches, 4, 1, make up 5, 1, 9, make up 10, 8, 4, 6, 3 to make up 48. So all of these are the calculations that are being done, again, thousands and thousands and thousands of years before it's supposed to have been invented.
Where in Africa?
So the Limbombo bone is found between modern-day Swaziland and South Africa. Ishango bone found, I want to say, in the Congo. So don't you think you would do much better at mathematics if you knew that your African ancestors invented mathematics?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
So this is the logical category that I was mentioning before. So this is the menstrual cycle. When you say menstrual, all you're saying is moon. The moon, exactly, month, all of those have the same root. So what is the connection between the moon, the baboon, which howls at the moon? This is a divinity called Jehuti in ancient Kemet, right? Then you also see Jehuti represented as the ibis bird with the moon on top, and written with the ibis bird here. And this is, again, how Jehuti is depicted in ancient Kemet as a baboon. And this is the divinity of math, science, writing, all of those types of things. So that was a sidebar. We're going to come back.
Nice sidebar.
But just to show us the connections between the way we speak still to this day and African languages like Akan. So in Akan we can say eson, it big, not it is big. If you say eye son, you're speaking ungrammatically, you're speaking like a child. You don't know how to speak Chi, right? So these are the things to let us know. Now, oftentimes, in the process of re-Africanization, we come to learn African languages. Some are preserved from the time that our ancestors were enslaved. Some are intentionally sankofa, going back and fetching it. So lots of words that we use to this day. Some people know adinkra. Do you know that word? Very good. Ashe. Have we heard that word before? Ashe. Now, some people say ashe. That's not the correct pronunciation. It goes from low tone to mid tone. Ashe. And it comes from the root verb she. So it comes from the root verb she, to happen. She. If in Yoruba I say kilo shele. So what is happening on the ground? She, right? Now to make a noun, I just add a in front of it. Ashe. This is the power to make something happen. So if you've said something and I want what you say to come to pass, I say Ashe in order to make that happen.
How do you spell it?
That's it. This is the correct spelling. This is how people would spell it who don't know how to spell it. This is how it's actually spelled in Yoruba. Ashe. See the dot under it makes it a sh sound, and the dot under this one makes it an e sound. Ashe.
I go.
I mean,
He's saying that we have to wrap up.
okay, no
But
problem.
I think, Dr. Enanovi, based on everybody here, we probably want to see him again. Is that possible? Is it possible?
You have to ask him.
Can we take a good time?
You have to ask him, and then he can create time for coming back to see you guys.
I will have to create down.
Yes, because I don't know how your time looks like. So if I say creating time means to come.
Are we all in agreement that we
Yes.
need to see this, finish this, at least this presentation? Because it's a three-part presentation. So we're just putting you on the spot to let you know we have to have the part two. So it has to be the itinerary, because Fulbright, when you wrote the grant, it says that we must get instruction in the African language. And as for this one, we are getting 3 in 1. The whole of the Europe, hey, so many.
The most important thing is my brother will do whatever it takes to schedule us again. It might not be in this room, it might be in the computer room, it might be in our conference room. So that is how it is. So I know that all of you are interested, including me, seeing how Rodney and Jacob can use this in the classroom. Because on the other than that, I would have said that in computer somebody outside to round up.
Can I, if I can round up. There were a few things I wanted to mention, but I didn't get a chance to mention them. But just in terms of the Akan language in society, you can find it in Adinkra, in the cloths, in the symbols, all throughout. Kente is also an Akan product, so if you see Kente strips when people are graduating, all of that, you find it all throughout Ghana. When I graduated, we had Kente woven into our graduation gowns. Another thing is that the Akan people, the stools, right? When you sit on stools, you find that the stools have found their way into architecture. So the Jubilee House, which is a seat of government, that this is shaped like a stool, and a traditional Akan stool. There's also the de facto national anthem. The official national anthem is in English, but the one that everyone sings and everyone knows is Yenara Asasini, which is again in the Akan language. So again, some of the points that I'm driving at are that the Akan language has played a role in the development politically, economically, social values, and attitudes. You can find it all throughout. And this is the thing, when you have a language that is spoken by the majority of the people, it makes sense that that will be something that will be adopted by the people as a whole in order to move forward. Now, there are some challenges because people say, oh, if we do it that way, then only the Akans will have an advantage. So we don't want to do that. So similar to the crabs in the barrel, we'd rather all be under white Eurasians than to allow any single African to be elevated, above us. And again, these are practical concerns. They would have some degree of a head start, people who are native Akan speakers. However, everybody has, some type of disadvantage when we're all adopting the languages of our oppressors that tell us black is bad, white is good, right? That tell us that, man is good, woman is bad. All of these things are built into the English language because you have ideas of diametric opposites, dichotomy, all of them are found in there. As soon as you have God versus devil, in Akan society, there was no idea of here is an all evil being and here's an all good being, and that's it. The idea is that the supreme being permeates everything. If you have the idea of the supreme being permeates everything, the Eurasian worldview doesn't make any sense because that means the supreme being is in hell too, and then the devil too, and then all these. It doesn't make any sense. If you look at Yoruba as well, they said we have to find a devil. So they said, okay, Ishu is going to be the devil now. You understand? So that's not our worldview, and it's not able to articulate things that are in the best interest of African people. So again, the Akan language has been just naturally, without forcing it on anyone, you find it being adopted in the cloth. You find people just speaking it, on the street. You find if people are going to the market, the de facto thing that they're going to use, they're going to assume that you speak Akan. Sometimes people will call me with a wrong line and they just start talking Chi to me. Sometimes I'm driving and someone says, hey! And then they say something in Chi, right? So this is the natural process that's going on now, but it has to be formalized in order for us to really reap the rewards in terms of the education system, in terms of the math, in terms of the science. We have an African Center School, and maybe you all can come and visit it, where we do all of this various teaching in African languages, the things that we just learned today. Right, that were on the door. The things that we've been learning today, the children learn it from this high. Because imagine how powerful we would be if we learned all of this before we turn 20, 30, 40, 50. Right? So I'll close with that. I wanted to go into more of those examples, but the way things work is the way things work, and I think we got something beneficial from this. And maybe we can do
You can give out an email and tell them where your office is and maybe office hours since they're on campus and they have some time. Some of them may be interested in conducting interviews, so it's nice to know that you're open to that.
No problem. So you can reach me here, obkamban@ug.edu.gh. My office is Institute of African Studies.
Is that the best way to make an appointment for your office hours is by email?
Yeah, you can give me by email. I'll also give you my number. Now, how long are you all here for?
We have 5 weeks.
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
We're living in Volta Hall.
Okay, so.
Okay.
We can see.
024.
Please give me a round of applause, please.
And next time I'll teach you that de facto national anthem. Yenara Asase.
You are one of the, I would say that I don't hide feelings. It is one among the peoples, or the best among the peoples.
Wow.
Which means that among the presentations that we have, I know I wasn't here, but the few minutes I was having them outside tells me that this is wonderful, and we are going to visit this lecture one more time. As I could just say, we are going to schedule you again, and going to invite you if I can.
And I'm giving you all a homework assignment. That is to, as you are here, go out in society and find elements of the Akan language and Akan culture. You'll see it written on the back of trotos, you'll see it on advertisements and billboards. Trotro, right? Those are the minibuses that you'll see. You'll see it written there. Advertisements that are for everyone, you'll see them written in Chi. So really what I'm getting at is how the Akan language is being used to solidify people and unite people beyond just ethnic boundaries. Oh no, those are just Akan people. No, we're all African people. Once we understand we're all African, then we'll look at the Akan language and say that's my language too. We'll look at Yoruba language and say that's my language too. We'll look at anti-American African and say that's my language too, right? All of these are our languages because we are African. Right? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Lee, we wanted to give you this gift as a token of appreciation for the non-appreciation.
Thank you so much. Madame Wasi. Merci.
Madame Wasif.
Like this picture.